This is Brent of the Brookbush Institute, and in this video we're going over our static hip flexor stretch. I'm going to have my friend Adam come out. He's going to help me demonstrate both the wrong way and the right way to do this stretch. Now, me and you have been personal trainers a long time. Let's show everybody how we see this done poorly quite often. All right, guys, and you can see he gets this nice arch to his back. If he threw his arms back, he looks like he should be on the front of the Titanic. Although this might be pretty, like it's definitely not the greatest way to do this stretch. If we think about how much hip extension you have, which is just 10 to 15 degrees, we know that this is not 15 degrees. It's more than 45. He has to be getting that mobility from somewhere else, and that should worry you a little bit. We want our stretches to be specific. You can get out of that position. It maybe even irks me a little bit to see you in that position, right? It's not a great thing to not know what you're stretching. We want to make sure that we're stretching stuff that's short. Remember, guys, hypermobility is just as dangerous as hypomobility. So if we're stretching things that aren't short, we could be setting somebody up for some dysfunction or possibly pain in the future. So how can we make this specific to just the hip flexors? And the truth is that it's actually easier. The stretch I'm going to show you guys is way easier than the ones you just saw. So Adam is going to set himself up with these nice 90-degree angles, right? So he's going to be 90 degrees with knee right underneath his hip and then leg straight back. And then he can go ankle right under this knee, and then this knee is level with this hip. So we get these nice right angles, and we get easy lines to monitor. He's got good straight posture this way. Remember, your psoas connects into your lumbar spine, so it is important to even watch how much lordosis you're getting here. Now, once he's in this position, all you have to do is go posterior pelvic tilt. Now, I don't tell my clients to posterior pelvic tilt, but that's what we're going to teach them. What I usually tell my clients to do is, can you tuck your tail, right? Scared dog. And if I have to, I'll give them a little manual pressure on their PSIS. Usually that'll get people to kind of tuck under. Good. Squeeze their glutes is another good way to get them to posterior pelvic tilt. And usually if you can teach that simple little turn of their pelvis under, can you feel that in the front of your hip?
Oh yeah.
It's like immediate. It just makes it so easy. You're just going, oh, hip flexor stretch, got it. Got it, it's just that easy. And now we can be pretty certain, because all we've done there with a posterior pelvic tilt is lengthen out our hip flexors via some hip extension. Now, what I can do from here is add a few little modifications if I wanted to go after specific muscles. Let's say I've taken my assessment one step further. I went from just doing the overhead squat assessment and seeing things like anterior pelvic tilt or excessive forward lean that make me think that my hip flexors are tight, to now I'm starting to think about, well, if knees bow in, that's femoral internal rotation, of my hip flexors, my gluteus minimus and my TFL, right, are internal rotators. You guys following me? How could I make a hip flexor stretch specific to the TFL and gluteus minimus? It's actually not that hard. I'm going to have Adam take this leg and turn it, face the camera real quick for me, Adam. He's going to take this foot, hopefully you guys can kind of see what I'm seeing, and he's going to put it behind this ankle. Right? So we don't need a lot of external rotation, but just a little bit of external rotation, because my TFL and glute min are internal rotators, so I'm going to externally rotate to lengthen them. He's then going to hip hike a little bit or lean in this way. That's going to adduct his hip relative to his pelvis, and you don't even have to do that much, because we still want just enough room to do a posterior pelvic tilt. All right, so now tuck under, and you should feel that more like on the lateral side of your hip. How's that feeling?
Yeah, feel it right here.
Good, so now I'm getting real specific, right? Like I felt like, okay, he had knees bow in, that functional valgus. I know the internal rotators are overactive, contributing to that knees bow in functional valgus. Maybe I even did some goniometry and he had a reduction in either internal rotation or external rotation. Like, it's a little complicated, but I'm getting specific. Now, what else could I do? Well, Adam, let me have you turn around one more time. All right. I could go rectus femoris. Let's say I have Adam as a patient and I noticed that a lot of his issues seem more geared around the knee. Now, if you guys are physical therapists, athletic trainers, chiropractors, you could even like do goniometric assessment to see if they had enough knee flexion. Maybe there's somebody who's post-surgical, right? And we know that that rec fem has just geared way up. Lots of overactivity, lots of active trigger points, lots of shortening, and we want to figure out a way to lengthen it. Well, Adam, he's already kind of in the habit of doing this, but if we take the hip flexor stretch and we go from this kind of plantered, flat foot out position to dorsiflexed, notice that increases the amount of flexion at the knee, which is now going to lengthen the rectus femoris a little bit. And what Adam should have noticed is when he goes from, so flop your foot all the way out, when he goes from there, posterior pelvic tilt, good, and then tucks his toe in, that all of a sudden he feels a lot more down the center of his thigh. Mm-hmm. Cool, right? So that's great. So that's a little bit more rectus femoris. So we got TFL, which was the turn the foot in and lean over a little bit. And then we got rectus femoris, which is throw the toes in there and get a little bit more knee flexion. And then you guys, of course, had the first variation we showed you, which is probably just more of a good general hip flexor stretch. Maybe would incorporate a little bit more psoas and iliacus because, you know, the TFL and the rectus femoris have a little bit more slack in them than these other two positions I've showed you. Now, let me kind of harp on a couple things that I don't like to see. The couch stretch has become incredibly popular. I want you guys to keep in mind that if I take this foot, throw it up on something this way, and then jam my body back against my foot, that number one is incredibly aggressive. And we have to get out of the habit of, if it didn't work, I need more. If it didn't work, it might not be the right technique. I've never seen anybody get additional benefit from the couch stretch that I couldn't get from a kneeling hip flexor stretch, especially with toes in. It's just too much. Not to mention the couch stretch is just rec fem. You're shortening the rectus femoris so much at the knee, or lengthening it so much at the knee, that when you go into a posterior pelvic tilt, the limiting structure is always going to be your rectus femoris, and you are going to miss TFL, glute min, psoas, and iliacus every time. So if your goal was to fix something like knees bow in or an anterior pelvic tilt, you're losing. You're losing because you're leaving a lot behind. Now, the other thing that I don't like to see is I don't like to see the very fancy hip flexor stretch, which is, Adam, if you raise your right arm, right? And then Adam side bends towards me, good. And then he rotates back this way. Now, the problem with this stretch is not that it's not theoretically sound. It is a very theoretically sound stretch. What we're doing here is we're trying to lengthen the psoas as far as possible, remembering that our psoas attaches to the vertebral bodies of L1 through L5. So if I side bend a little bit, right, I pull my psoas a little longer on that side, right? And then if I rotate back, it lengthens even further. The problem with this stretch is as soon as people do this stuff, they tend to lose their posterior pelvic tilt, they tend to arch their back, and then they tend to go into hip hiking. And now what we have is a theoretically great stretch with bad form. And I have to be honest, I've never seen good form on that stretch ever, especially once left alone. It's one of those stretches where maybe you can get it set up right in clinic, maybe you can get it set up right with coaching, but as soon as you give it for a home exercise program, as soon as you walk away from your patient, as soon as you turn your back, it becomes like this mess of, they just look like al dente noodles. They're like, hey, look, I'm stretching my hip flexors. And it kind of goes back into our don't call this the Titanic stretch. Right, good, yep. All right. Last point I'm going to make, harping on the static hip flexor stretch here, guys, is this is not a stability exercise. So, feel free to give somebody something to hold on to. Let them hold on to a wall. Like I like to do these stretches right next to a wall or like a weight rack so I can hold on to. There's nothing wrong with that. We're trying to stretch. We'll do stability exercises later. And first steps first. Let's go all the way back to, can we just do a good static hip flexor stretch? I know I've given you guys a lot to think about with modifications and maybe things you shouldn't do, but where we should start is stable position, 90-90, 90-90. Can you posteriorly pelvic tilt, hold for 30 to 120 seconds calmly, and get a good release? That's it. That's where we're gonna start. Guys, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments box below. Thank you, Adam.